Have you ever noticed that the more you explain yourself, the less people seem to respect you? You justify your decisions, defend your actions, and try to make others understand your intentions. Yet somehow, instead of gaining respect, you appear uncertain, and your words lose their power. This is one of the most overlooked truths about human nature. People often judge confidence not by what you say, but by how much you feel the need to explain. Before I continue, subscribe now. You might see me again. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He observed that powerful people rarely waste time seeking approval or defending every choice they make. They understand that excessive explanations send a dangerous message. They suggest doubt. They imply that your decisions require validation from others. And once people sense that need for approval, they begin to question your authority. This does not mean you should never communicate or clarify important matters. It means you must stop feeling obligated to justify every move, every opinion, and every decision. The more you chase acceptance, the more power you give away. The strongest individuals allow their actions to speak louder than their words. In today's video, we will explore Machiavelli's seventh law. Never explain yourself. It signals weakness. You will discover why silence creates authority, why over-explaining destroys influence, and how powerful people command respect without constantly defending themselves. Once again, don't forget to subscribe. You might not come across us again. Let's get into it. When you constantly explain yourself, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. People start to see you differently, even if you do not notice it at first. At the beginning, you think you are being responsible, polite, and clear. You believe that if you give enough reasons, people will understand you and respect your choices. But human psychology does not work that way. The more you explain, the more you weaken your position, not because your reasons are wrong, but because your need to justify them sends a hidden message that you are unsure of yourself. And uncertainty is the fastest way to lose respect in any social environment. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He observed that authority is not built through excessive explanation, but through certainty and restraint. When you over-explain, you unconsciously invite others to question your judgment. Instead of accepting your words, they begin to analyze them. Instead of respecting your decision, they start evaluating whether it was correct. This shifts the power dynamic without you realizing it. You move from being the person who decides to the person who must defend their decisions. And once you are in a position of defense, you have already lost influence. In relationships, this becomes even more obvious. A man who constantly explains his actions to a partner, trying to avoid misunderstanding or conflict, slowly loses his presence. What was once confidence turns into approval-seeking behavior. The more he talks, the less weight his words carry. In friendships and workplace situations, the same pattern appears. People who rarely justify themselves are often perceived as more decisive and reliable. Meanwhile, those who constantly explain every choice are seen as uncertain, even if they are intelligent or capable. The truth is that most people do not remember your explanations. They remember your energy, your certainty, and your ability to stand firm without emotional dependency on approval. Over-explaining also opens the door for others to challenge you. Once you give too many reasons, people start picking them apart. They may not even disagree with your original decision, but your explanation gives them material to question you. A simple statement becomes a debate. A small decision becomes a negotiation. And over time, this weakens your authority in subtle but permanent ways. The strongest individuals understand something very important. They do not need to fill silence with justification. They make decisions, they stand by them, and they move forward. Not because they are arrogant, but because they understand that respect is not earned through endless explanation. It is earned through consistency, calmness, and certainty. When you stop over-explaining, something changes immediately in how people treat you. They begin to assume you have a reason, even if you do not fully express it. They begin to respect your boundaries instead of testing them. And most importantly, they start to take your words seriously, because you no longer dilute them with unnecessary justification. In the end, over-explaining is not communication. It is permission for others to question your authority. And once you understand this, you begin to realize that sometimes the most powerful answer is simply no explanation at all. When you are challenged, questioned, or misunderstood, your first instinct is usually to defend yourself. You want to correct the story, explain your intentions, and make sure people see your side clearly. But Machiavelli understood something that most men learn too late in life. The moment you rush to defend yourself, you step down from power. You are no longer in control of the situation. You are reacting, not leading. Silence, on the other hand, keeps you in control. It creates uncertainty in others, and that uncertainty works in your favor. When you do not immediately respond to criticism or accusations, people are forced to sit with their own assumptions. They begin to question whether they are even right. This psychological space is where real influence is built. A man who speaks less but chooses his words carefully always appears stronger than a man who reacts emotionally to every challenge. Silence is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the ability to resist the urge to prove yourself in every situation. Most men destroy their own image, not because they are wrong, but because they feel obligated to explain everything. The more you defend yourself, the more material you give others to argue against you. It becomes a cycle where your explanation creates more questions, and your response creates more doubt. Powerful individuals understand that not every statement deserves a reply. Not every accusation deserves attention. When you respond to everything, you give importance to things that should have been ignored. And in doing so, you lower your own value without realizing it. Think about social situations. A man who is calm when criticized is often seen as more confident than the one who immediately jumps to justify himself. Even if he is misunderstood, his silence creates the impression that he is unbothered, secure, and in control of his reality. That perception alone changes how others treat him. In contrast, a man who constantly explains himself appears unsettled, as if he needs approval to feel validated. In relationships, this becomes even more important. Women are often more attracted to emotional stability than constant verbal justification. A man who remains calm and does not over-explain his actions creates a sense of strength and mystery. It signals that he is not easily shaken by opinions or pressure. That does not mean ignoring everything or being cold. It means choosing your responses wisely, instead of reacting emotionally to every misunderstanding. Machiavelli would describe this as controlled presence. The ability to stay composed while others try to provoke you is a form of power most people never develop. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. When you do not rush to defend, people often expose their own assumptions, emotions, or even intentions. In that moment, you gain clarity without saying much at all. This is why silence often feels uncomfortable to others. It removes control from their hands. They expect you to react, and when you do not, the dynamic shifts. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is a form of authority. A man who masters silence does not need to argue to prove his value. His calmness does it for him. And over time, people begin to respect not what he says, but what he refuses to say. That is where real power begins. The need to explain yourself often comes from something deeper than communication. It comes from the desire to be understood, accepted, and approved by others. On the surface, this looks harmless. You think if people just understand your reasons, they will respect you. But Machiavelli would call this a hidden weakness, because once you depend on understanding from others, you give them control over your emotional state. You are no longer acting from confidence. You are acting from fear of judgment. This is where many men lose their strength without even realizing it. Every time you over-explain, you are not just sharing information, you are asking for approval. You are silently saying, "Please agree with me so I can feel right." And people can sense this energy, even if your words sound logical. Humans are extremely sensitive to emotional dependence. When someone feels like they need approval, others naturally feel less inclined to give it. Instead of respect, they begin to test you. Instead of accepting your words, they begin to challenge them. This is how validation-seeking behavior slowly destroys authority. In relationships, this is one of the most common traps men fall into. A man may feel misunderstood by his partner and feel the need to explain every detail of his actions, thinking it will bring clarity and peace. But what often happens is the opposite. The more he explains, the more he appears uncertain. The more he seeks understanding, the more he loses emotional control. Over time, the dynamic shifts. He becomes the one trying to be approved, while she becomes the one deciding whether to accept his explanations. This is not about blame. It is about power structure. Whoever seeks validation loses power in that moment. Machiavelli's philosophy is clear on this point. Control belongs to the one who does not need approval. In social situations, the same pattern appears. Men who constantly explain their decisions often come across as insecure, even if they are capable and intelligent. They feel the need to justify everything, from small choices to major actions. But instead of gaining respect, they create the impression that their judgment is always open for debate. People begin to feel that their authority is negotiable. And once your authority becomes negotiable, it is already weakened. The danger of validation seeking is that it disguises itself as communication. You think you are being clear, but in reality, you are revealing emotional dependency. Strong men do not speak to be validated. They speak when necessary and accept that not everyone will understand them. They do not waste energy trying to control how others interpret their actions. They understand that perception is not always in their control, but reaction is. When you stop seeking validation, something powerful happens internally. You begin to detach your self-worth from external approval. You stop feeling the need to defend every misunderstanding. You stop trying to fix every incorrect opinion about you. And in that space, confidence grows naturally, because it is no longer dependent on agreement from others. Machiavelli would describe this as emotional independence, the ability to act without needing permission, approval, or understanding is what separates leaders from followers. A follower explains. A leader decides. A follower seeks agreement. A leader accepts disagreement without losing composure. The moment you stop needing validation, your communication changes completely. You speak less, but with more weight. You explain less, but with more clarity. And most importantly, you no longer hand over your power in exchange for being understood. That is the hidden danger of validation, and the moment you rise above it is the moment you begin to operate from true strength. One of the most powerful principles in Machiavellian thinking is simple. Power is never proven through explanation, it is proven through results. Many men make the mistake of believing that if they explain their intentions clearly enough, people will eventually respect them. They talk about what they plan to do, why they are doing it, and how others should understand their actions. But in reality, words without results carry very little weight. Over time, people stop listening and start judging based on what they see, not what they hear. Machiavelli understood that human beings are not convinced by promises or explanations. They are convinced by outcomes. A man who constantly talks but delivers little becomes predictable and ignored, while a man who speaks less but acts decisively becomes respected, even feared. Actions create authority because they remove doubt. There is nothing to debate when results are visible. In contrast, explanations always leave room for argument. When you rely too much on words, you give others the opportunity to question your capability. But when your actions consistently align with strength, discipline, and results, you remove the need for justification entirely. People begin to form conclusions about you without you having to convince them of anything. In relationships, this principle is especially clear. A man who constantly explains how much he cares, how loyal he is, or how serious he is, often finds himself in a weak position. His words are tested more than they are believed. But a man whose actions consistently show respect, consistency, and emotional control does not need to explain anything. His behavior speaks for him. The same applies in work, leadership, and social status. Those who achieve results do not need to defend their competence. Their work becomes their reputation. Machiavelli would argue that reputation built on action is far more powerful than reputation built on speech. Action is proof, while words are only claims. Another important truth is that excessive explanation often slows down progress. The more time you spend justifying your choices, the less time you spend executing them. This creates a cycle where you become trapped in communication instead of movement. Powerful men avoid this trap by focusing on doing rather than discussing. They understand that momentum creates respect faster than conversation ever will. When you act decisively, people may not understand your reasoning immediately, but they will respect your confidence. And over time, understanding usually follows results, not explanations. There is also a psychological effect at play. People tend to assign higher value to what is rare and less explained. When you constantly talk about your actions, you reduce their impact. But when you let results appear without excessive commentary, they feel more significant. Silence combined with achievement creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to respect. Machiavelli's philosophy teaches that mystery and effectiveness together create influence. A man who over-explains removes mystery. A man who over-talks removes impact. But a man who acts first and speaks only when necessary builds authority naturally. The strongest individuals in any field share this trait. They do not waste energy convincing others of their value. They demonstrate it. And once your actions consistently speak louder than your words, you reach a point where explanation becomes unnecessary. People no longer ask you to justify yourself, because your results already do the talking. That is the true strength behind this principle, and it is one of the clearest paths to lasting respect and influence. Mastering the art of saying less is not about becoming silent or refusing to communicate. It is about learning control over your words so that nothing you say weakens your position. Machiavelli would describe this as disciplined speech, the ability to speak only when it increases your power or clarity, and to remain silent when words add nothing but vulnerability. Most men lose influence not because they lack intelligence, but because they speak too much and explain too often. Every unnecessary sentence reduces impact. Every emotional justification exposes uncertainty, and every attempt to over-clarify weakens authority. The first step in saying less is understanding that not every situation deserves a response. When someone misunderstands you, your instinct may be to correct them immediately. But powerful men pause before reacting. They ask themselves whether responding will improve their position or weaken it. If the answer is unclear, they often choose silence. This is not avoidance, it is strategy. Another important part of saying less is removing emotional language from your speech. When men feel pressured, disrespected, or misunderstood, they often speak too much in an attempt to fix the situation. They explain their feelings, defend their intentions, and try to make others see their perspective. But emotional over-explaining does not create respect. It creates exposure. It reveals where you are emotionally attached, and that reduces your perceived strength. Machiavelli would advise that emotional control is more powerful than emotional expression in moments of tension. Saying less also means avoiding the habit of repeating yourself. Many men say the same thing in different ways, hoping that repetition will increase understanding. But in reality, repetition weakens authority. A strong statement should stand on its own. If people did not understand you the first time, repeating it without new value only reduces its weight. Instead, you say it once, clearly, and allow your presence to reinforce it. Silence after clarity is powerful because it signals confidence in your message. Another key principle is learning to end conversations when they are no longer productive. Weak communication often continues long after the point has been made. Men keep talking to fill silence, to avoid awkwardness, or to feel heard. But strong men understand that control includes knowing when to stop speaking. Ending a conversation cleanly preserves your energy and your image. It leaves no room for unnecessary conflict or emotional leakage. In relationships, saying less is especially important. The more a man explains his every action, the more he shifts into a position of emotional dependency. Instead, he communicates clearly, sets boundaries when needed, and avoids turning every misunderstanding into a long discussion. His words are calm, measured, and intentional. This creates stability, not confusion. Machiavelli would describe this as controlled communication, where speech is used as a tool, not a reaction. To truly master saying less, you must also become comfortable with being misunderstood. Not everything about you needs to be explained. Not every decision needs approval. And not every opinion needs acceptance. When you accept that misunderstanding is part of life, you stop trying to control how everyone perceives you. This removes the pressure to over-explain and frees you to act with more confidence. Ultimately, saying less is not about reducing communication. It is about increasing impact. The less you waste words, the more powerful each word becomes. And when people realize that you speak only when necessary, they begin to listen more carefully when you do. That is where real influence begins. In Machiavellian thinking, power is never loud or desperate. It is controlled, calm, and intentional. The moment you feel the need to constantly explain yourself, you step into weakness, because you start seeking approval instead of commanding respect. Real strength is shown when you can stand by your actions without excessive justification. You speak when it adds value, and you stay silent when words reduce your power. People respect certainty, not over-explanation. They trust actions, not endless reasoning. If you master this law, you stop reacting emotionally and start operating strategically. In silence and restraint, your authority grows naturally and cannot be easily challenged.